Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Today we're going to take on one of the reels that I use as an illustration in my lever drag versus star drag. This one is a Pflueger Contender G50. It's a large size reel. 50 is probably comparable to a Penreel's 4.0, or maybe it's between the 4.0 and the 6.0. This one's got some braided line on it. It's got appears to be an aluminum spool, graphite case. Nice. I'm not sure if it's stainless trim rings or not. Nice setup overall. If you have one of these, we're going to show you how to take it apart and clean it, lubricate it, service it, and so on. If you don't have one of these, or you're thinking of buying one, it'll give you an idea how the reel is made, and it'll show you the components inside of it and how it basically operates. So I'm going to do just that. This one came as part of a set of flea market finds, and what happened with that was that it was just in the box, so I didn't go out and search for this reel. This reel kind of found me, and looks like pretty solid construction. It's a bigger reel, so it's pretty much set up for an ocean type of an environment, but could be deep lakes, could be Great Lakes trolling, for example, or anywhere you need a lot of line and capacity. Not sure what the capacity on this is, but my guess would be 300 yards of 20-pound test or so. I don't think this is the original handle to the reel. It appears to be a replacement, because the other one that I have as a Pflueger Contender has a little bit of a different setup from the handle, but that's all right. As long as it's fitting the reel, it's immaterial, unless you're a collector, and you're not going to be a collector with a reel in this condition. So we're going to take this off. Normally I would advise you to go get the schematics, kind of winging this one. I don't even know where I might be able to find a schematic for that. I imagine on the internet somewhere we would be able to find that. And a little bit on Pflueger. So Pflueger was a company. It was founded by Ernest Pflueger back in the, I'm not quite sure if it was 1920 or the 1910s. At one point in time, the company had quite a few different models and lines out there. They did trade level lines. They did one called Four Brothers, because Ernest Pflueger had 4 sons. They had some trademarked ones, and they also had some that they produced under Pflueger. In the 1950s, Pflueger was acquired by Shakespeare Company, and they're still part of that Shakespeare group of companies today. It's Pure Fishing. Pure Fishing has Abu and Penn, Shakespeare and Pflueger, and some others. So we started by removing the star drag, and there's some dirt under there. This reel was not performing well, but it was performing, so I don't expect any broken parts. I don't know even if parts are available for this one. I really haven't done my homework here. It just happened to be that this one was still sitting on my bench, and with this pandemic and the projects, I just decided to go ahead and tune this one up while we were at it. So I'm going to clean the inside of this. We'll put that into there. You'll notice a couple of things. I have a protective glove on my hand. I also use a parts tray for all the pieces and parts that come off the reel. Since I don't know if a schematic is available, I am kind of doing this one by feel, if you will. I'll recommend that pictures be taken along the way, just in case you get confused. If you go to reinstall and something just doesn't feel right, you can always go back to the pictures, find out the sequence that you took them off, and then go act accordingly. Now on this one, I don't know if the side plate screws are all the same, so I'm taking them out, and as I take them out, I'm laying them on my bench, and then I will, if they're all the same, they'll just go on the parts tray. If there's a different size for one of these, then I will note where that different size screw came out of, and when I go to reinstall, know that that's where it belongs. So I'm taking the gear side plate off now. I do notice that it just released springs. I had my finger on there, but I did notice that I have a case separation now. So I want to be careful as I remove that top, because I know that there's springs pushing that part out. So let's just take it off, see what we got then. Okay, so this is a fairly simple setup. We have a couple of things here. We have some tension washers that have remained in there, so I want to get those out. These are sensitivity washers as much as anything else. They go in here to help with the sensitivity on the star adjuster. So these were nested, which means that's the minimal type of tension. If you want to make it a little bit more sensitive, you can go face to face, or you can go opposite where you have that space, and that will help to give you a little bit more play as you tighten down the reel. The inside of this, well, let's start with the obvious here. We want to clean up the outside of the case here. There is some dry dirt and grease and the like, so I'm just going to take a piece of steel wool. It's 4/0 steel wool. It's the least coarse of the group, least abrasive. I just want to get that out. You can pull the ring up if you wanted to, clear the channel so you can get at all of that. And then when you're done with that, you can wipe that off with a paper towel. So servicing not only is just making sure that the reel is appropriately lubed, it's also about taking care of the dirt and the debris inside of it, because that can lead to problems over time. And on the back end here, we want to make sure that's clean, and this is very clean. There's no grease or grime or anything in the channels here, so we're okay with that. On the eccentric, you can use some oil. Make sure it's a real oil. Just get it a little bit behind there, and just work that in. Notice the where that spring is located, in case for some reason or other it might pop out. That spring, that little tab on the eccentric, is going to go inside of the jack here. So when we go to reinstall, note that. Note that the springs are on the outside of the yoke, not underneath it. We're going to take those springs out so we don't lose those. And I'm thinking, as I'm looking at this right now, that the main problem with this reel is simply that it has no grease. It's just been dried out over time. So let's go ahead and take these pieces off. I'm going to start by taking this dog off, because that tends to shoot. So I'm just going to remove the spring from that to take the tension off and just back it off. I'm going to pull the top pieces from the main gear. I'll pull the main gear next, or take the yoke out, either one. Whichever would like to come first is welcome to that, or they may both come out at the same time. I'm laying them on my table right now until I can get to the point where I can, well, for whatever reason, that's probably the other reason. It seems like these drag washers may be stuck to the shaft, causing the problem. So let's get those off. Yeah, that seems to be a little bit of the problem here. So I'm trying to save the drag washers. So most of the time you do not need to replace drag washers, so just be careful with them. Use a little, that should help free that up. These drag washers are a heavy plastic. There we go. Alright, so make sure you notice the sequence to that. This is how it goes. We'll play with that stack in just a moment. We have that click star assembly here, which is what the anti-reverse dog is going to go into. Make sure you notice that the direction of those tabs. It's so easy to flip this thing over when you're going to reinstall. So make sure you know the orientation there. Also, the spool gear comes out on this side. So this is your base assembly on this side. Check to make sure that you're got a structurally sound main shaft. Simple as it is, you want to make sure that those hold downs are tight, and then we can go ahead and service this and reinstall. So I'm going to pull the drag washers out of the main gear. I'm going to clean the channel. I'm going to use the steel wool for that. And what we have here is not grease or that, it's just simply tarnish. So whatever the metal is, the metal has tarnished. I want to check the teeth of the main gear, making sure that they're not damaged in any way. Again, this was sluggish, and I think in this case this reel was sluggish because it has no grease, as opposed to dried grease, which also causes a sluggishness. So we're just going to spread a couple of dabs of the reel grease. In this case, I'm using a Penn Precision reel grease. I've said many times, doesn't matter whose reel grease you're using, just make sure it's reel grease. And then we can go ahead and put that ratchet back on. Go ahead and put the bottom washer on, and then go ahead and install the main gear. Well, I'm thinking that we may need to do the yoke and the spool gear first. So again, make sure the yoke is clear, clean. Put a little bit on the slot on both sides. Do the same thing with the pinion gear here. Check all the teeth, make sure that they're not damaged or bent in any regard. Get some grease on there. Again, you don't need to fill every tooth. Since one is larger than the other, it's all going to spread over time. We're going to clean the jack. This has some dried grease on it. Just clean it, wipe it off with a paper towel. Put a little bit of grease into the back channel of this. And that's going to ride inside, as we noted. And there's really only one way that this is going to ride. And I like to move that all the way up when we go to reinstall. Alright, we're going to put the yoke assembly on. There's a indentation in the spool gear that faces the spool. In this case, the spool's already on, so we're just going to make sure it goes on the right way there. I'm going to grab those, I'll leave those springs there for a moment. We're going to take the main gear now. I'm going to put that on and I'm going to snap it in and mesh it. Oops. Let's see if we can get the anti-reverse dog in without removing that main gear again. I think we can. Yep, there you go. Just checking to make sure that that's okay. Let's take that main gear off for a moment. Just want to make sure that it seats properly. And this is, so the anti-reverse dog, then we're going to grab the spring from both sides. I guess I could have put that on easily that way. And then slip it over the you want to slip that over the post here. And what will happen is, as this turns, the spring will bring it back to the lockdown position. Okay, you can put that clip back on then. Put the main gear back on. Now we've got these washers. Now they're hard washers, so they don't need lubrication, but they've stuck with some debris and junk, probably salt water, so they do need to be cleaned. I'm going to use a utility knife here just to separate the one. And I don't know, I'm guessing it's probably just salt water that's stuck here that's caused this to be an issue. But it's an issue nonetheless. You want to take your steel wool then and clean that off. You can scrape some of that off if you like. I'm sorry if this is off camera. I'm trying to be careful with the blade of that knife. There just seems to be some salt buildup and the like, so not a big deal here. I don't know if replacement washers are even available for this. These look like kind of generics, so I imagine if we had a problem with the washers that they could be replaced pretty easily. Okay, these look like we can salvage them. Get both sides nice and clean on that as we do with the other sides. last one here. And the top of the last one. Okay, so we've got these clear. Just feeling them. They're hard washers, so the hard washers don't receive service. There is some stuff that's just, as I mentioned, kind of accumulated there, but we're okay with those in the last one. Okay, so let's reassemble the main gear then. We go hard washer, and we do a round one. Another of the hard washers, and then the eared one always goes in the middle. A hard washer, top washer. And then we had that stack, and I didn't remove the stack at all, but we have a shim washer next. And we have the burring. The burring appears to be a sealed burring, but it doesn't hurt to put a little oil on there. And we have one of those adjusting washers there. And then we can take the case and we can reset this case. Now, in order to do that, you want to put the 2 screws onto this post. We'll give this one more turn just to make sure everything's working the way it should. You have to reverse and all. It's doing fine. And then we can work to mesh this stud with this groove here. So that's, you got 2 things going on here. You got to push down visually, and you got to kind of work with, yep, there you go. You can hear it. You have to work this arm as you're going to mesh the case in order to ensure that you have it seated properly. If you don't, you're going to press down on that stud. You're going to jam the inner workings of this thing, and nothing's going to be right. So I'm going to go kind of in a north, south, east, west pattern. In this case, it's 5 screws, so I guess whatever the points of a 5-star would be. But you kind of get the idea. I'm going kind of in an opposite direction. I want to maintain equal pressure on this side plate as I put it back together. And then we got to go over the other side and to service the spool, but we want to complete one side at a time if you can. Alright, so I'm going to go this way, and one more of these. So we've done the internals on this side. It's a nice setup. It's not dissimilar to the Shakespeare Tidewater series reel or the Okuma Convector series, other than it's a bigger reel. But they're not too far apart. I'm going to take those shim washers that were there. Next up is the star adjuster. And you want to make sure this goes on square. Just trying to grab the main shaft as I put that on. Once it comes through enough that you can center your handle for that, it makes it easier. And you do want to tighten this down before you finish the handle off. Alrighty, we're pretty good with that then. Alright, as I mentioned, this is not the original handle. I imagine there's some kind of cap that goes over this, but this one's been doing this for whatever it's been. Like I said, I got this at a kind of a lot sale, so I don't know the history behind this reel, which is one of those reasons why I like to take these reels apart and service them before I sell any of them. I don't want the reel to reflect poorly on what I do, so I want to make sure that I don't just flip a reel, but rather that I service the reel and can stand behind it should anything be. Okay, the handle's tight. Let's just give it a run. Well, it's going a whole lot smoother already. Probably needs just a little bit of adjustment there. It's going a way lot smoother. Let's take this side off and get to the spool then. 4 screws on this side, 5 on the other. I'm going to put these into the tray, and I'm just going to make a reckless assumption that all of these screws are the same in terms of size. I'll take a quick peek over there as I throw them in to see if anything's longer than the other ones. And we should be able to pull the spool out from this side. This one probably was using a salt and has a little bit of stick going on there. Okay, so we have a bearing underneath. That's nice. We have at least 2 ball bearing construction. We have the plastic idler gear. You want to check that to make sure all the teeth are okay there. We can oil that bearing, even though again these look like sealed bearings. Want to pull the spool now. We have that bearing. Let's put some oil on that, even though it may not seep in. And we got some accumulated salt and junk here, so let's just get that off while we're at it. So I'm using dry steel wool. You may need something like a penetrating oil to dissolve some of that stuff. We'll use a paper towel to clean it up. So it looks like a corrosion resistant spool. That's a nice deal there. And then in the back, oops, just dropped 2 of my screws out there and I caught that. We've already lubed up the side of the spool here, so nothing's new. While you have the case out, you could go in there, grab a paper towel or something, clear the dirt out. You could spray that down as well with some WD-40 in that. You don't want to miss the opportunity to clean the reel up while you have it. All right, so then we'll take the spool. For whatever reason, whenever I take a spool out with this braid and the like, it always tends to trap, so make sure that you're free of that. Chopped the piece anyway, didn't I? I don't know what kind of knot that was. Alright, you can put a little bit of grease onto the stud end of this, where it's going to go into the bearing. And then we just want to reseat this then. You can also put a little bit of grease onto this metal wheel, but again, it's intersecting with a plastic idler gear, so the plastic by itself is kind of self-lubricating. And then we can grab the side plate. A little bit of an issue meshing it in there. There we go. So we're meshed in. Trim ring. 4 side plate screws, and that's the Pflueger Contender Star Drag 50 size reel. And overall, I like what I'm seeing. I don't know what the price point on this one is. I'm going to guess it was probably around $100 or maybe just a little bit less. So it's a value price versus some of the bigger ocean reels. It would probably compare favorably with Penn's products. Same company right now anyway, it's the same company, but a little bit less expensive. Again, for trolling, for deep water drop fishing, that's what this is made for. And overall, I don't know when it was made. My guess is it's been a while. And then the last thing we want to do, the reason I was cranking that, is we want to pull the cap with the pawl in it. If we can. Unscrew that and put a drop of oil in so that the pawl is lubricated. That pawl turns every time it gets to the end of the swing. And putting oil in there is just going to make it turn easier so that you don't rip the forks off of it. The pawl is a cylindrical piece with 2 forks. You want to make sure that those forks are clear. This one's got some junk on it, so it's a good thing we did pull it. Just using my fingernail to clear the channel out. It sits in a little cap. So you want to put it in the cap, and you want to put a little bit of oil on there. Then you can reinstall. Now reinstalling, you got to mesh the teeth of the pawl with the teeth of the worm gear. So it doesn't always happen where you get it right the first time, so just be careful with it. Most of the time you're able to get it started. Oh, I'm having a little bit of trouble with that right now. There we go. Get it started, turn it by hand. And instead of just screwing it all the way down, I tend to just shake it a little bit, and that way you can try and get the teeth into the channel of the worm gear. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Just be careful with it. Don't go tightening it all the way down until you know that you're in that channel like we are now. And then you'll be able to just turn it. So wow, what a difference that makes. Just a little bit of cleanup. We've cleaned the drags up. Tighten that down to make sure we have the full support of those. We do. It's a nice, nice tight reel there. And it's a good flea market find. I'm sure I didn't pay a lot for this as part of that bigger lot of reels. It's got a nice, nice play to it. This is nice and smooth with limited travel in it. Yeah, it's got a replacement handle. Yeah, it's missing a cap, but that doesn't mean it can't go fishing. And nice and clean, serviced, lubed, ready to go. This has got a 3.6 to 1 gear ratio, and it says the line capacity is 330 yards of 30-pound monofilament, which means you could probably get almost 500 yards of braid if that's what you want to do. But that's the Pflueger Contender. It's the G50, and it's a nice reel. Now you know what it's made of. If you have a reel like this, you know how to service it. If you're thinking of buying a reel like this, you know what's inside it. If you have a reel like this that needs to be serviced and it kind of intimidates you and you don't want to do it, you can always contact me. I do repairs by mail, and I'll be happy to work on this or any other reel that you may have that you would like me to service. If you do, please send that to my email, secondchancetackle, 2ND, chancetackle@gmail.com. That information is available at the end of this video. So with that, I thank you for viewing. Stay well during this pandemic, and hopefully we'll all get through this and get back to fishing in the near term. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Thank you for watching.